Little mother can hear my voice. Shook mildly, like the sound of wind blowing across the fracture of the door. Squeezed my throat every word. Came out struggling as though I were attempting to control something that was my heart was hammering about ready to explode. Like though my chest were about to explode, my hands became unintentionally tighter around them. My breathing became no more even. Ragged and sporadic, every little bit sound in the silent chamber set my heart ablaze. Fearing the secret would cause a skip and beat, greet everyone with the light. Maya here today wants to tell her tale. A story I used to believe I would keep hidden, always never to talk of again. Sadly, the reality is that I am the one in this story seems to be flawed. Thus far unreal, like something from a movie. However it happened in my actual life, no matter the extent of my longing to wipe the memories, they still clearly show in my head. I worry daily, and I never will be able to correct my errors or identify peace with the person I most offended. Wounds I brought about linger on, not only both emotionally and in terms of trust that was lost regardless of how hard I worked. I am a pretty person, not undo what I have done. Girl sharing my parents' little apartment, Caramel by the Sea, California town, calm and lyrical environment where my father Alex is the proprietor of a well-known seafood restaurant. Eatery in his vicinity, he usually visits good treatment of his body and enjoys visiting the gym, so even if he is beyond 50 years old, his body still has great tone. He resembles considerably younger than his actual age. Though constantly strong and forceful, he is delicate with my mother Sarah, a literature teacher in the high school close by our house, reflects compassion and delicacy, driven especially by a passion. Every night, she reads classical works. Seeks comfort at the window, submerged in her book pages beneath the warm, always willing to contribute, radiance of light, knowledge, and love my mother has been endowed with. My guiding star, helping me to grasp the core of living from the heart, and really from my early years till adulthood, I have been caught in the relentless adoration of both my parents, whose hearts have been poured into loving and shielding me. I remember the delight of my father's coming home from the office, a moment that always felt like home. I would run to him, tossing myself into his hug, using my little arms, hugging him while wrapping his neck closely. My father was always the model concerning peace and safety in his arms. Everything felt fine. I never overanalyzed. I felt loved and sheltered just then. I was also a girl with a penchant for new lovely objects, sometimes choosing the most beautiful gowns I have ever seen. Every time I would run to my parents, spin around several times and excitedly, knowing they would be complimenting something, wait for, loved me, and grinned in their eyes, full of proud of those modest remarks made. I believed to be the happiest girl in the globe. Following every supper, when the complete family assembled around the TV screen, I developed a practice of sitting on my father's lap. He routinely held me in his arms. Those hugs were kind and friendly. I grew up surrounded with that catered to the level of pampering necessary to develop. Been a hard habit to quit. Even as I matured, I still hung to the habit of seated on the lap of my father as though I were still a small child, yearning affection in his protective hug. Felt like a beloved link, a small pleasure I never wanted to give up. But recently, each times I curled up on my father's lap or hurried to give him a hug, sensation had changed. There was an anomaly in his answer that I couldn't ignore. He no longer accepted my hugs with the same simplicity. Rather, there was a stop, and occasionally his arms would just a little more than before. The way he fixed me had changed too, lacking the kind warmth that once defined a father's love. In times of affection for his child, I often noticed a confusion in his eyes, as though he were hiding something outside my understanding. During these times, my hearts run a hint of intuition, implying that something is amiss, but nonetheless, I'm not sure I should embrace it. Maybe I am obsessing over giving weight to a nevertheless a transient feeling. Still, this uneasiness remains as a reminder that our link has changed from its past simplicity. My father, despite his advanced years, still committed to physical activity, reflecting strength and style his body recalls of me of his young years. He embodies not only fatherhood as well as a wonderful fusion of charm and strength. Always mesmerized me. Every time I looked at my father, I find myself unable to ignore his everlasting beauty, marked by wide shoulders and a good body. Both time he spins envelopes me in warmth, unusual feeling that avoids exact definition, possibly the confidence he exudes, the strong presence that reminds me of my early years in his was my whole universe. Only lately that Sentiment has changed somewhat. It's not. Simply that there was a great amount. Feeling I went through while glancing at my father longer than expected any time I was not far from him, something stirred in me. That experienced. Many one day after home from school, I discovered he was already comfortable in the sofa, viewer fixated on TV. As I was walking in, I saw him on the TV, seated there calm and familiar, and even now, I felt a sense, despite growing up, of solace in that instant. Racing to him, I had a great sense of knowledge as I jumped upon his lap, same as I did growing up without. Dad put his arms around hesitation, me exactly as he always had, yet this time the air underwent an obvious change between us, which makes me sense unease I couldn't get rid of. I tried to write it off convincingly. Myself, it was only a fantasy of my fantasy, but it wasn't only a passing fancy. Feeling, I started to notice something brushing into me as I sat down. I tried first to ignore it. I calmed myself by telling it was only the difficult place I discovered myself in, or maybe something stashed away in his pocket. But with time and indisputable awareness descended in increasing strength with every pulse, made the air thick and stifling, changing to formerly reassuring close proximity to a source of uncomfortable. I stayed still, working to keep my cool, but a frenzy of unquestioned questions stirred. My father's eyes saw within me a shyness, adding to the stress in the room. Hushed his mind, both of us stayed peaceful, sitting in the heavy environment, until Mom suddenly came into. Breaking the suspense caused me to feel a need to climb, yet my legs felt rooted. Still mute, immobilized, Dad looked at, focused on me, and in his eyes the known former warmth had disappeared. Then the door crested open, and my mother moved, in upsetting the repressive quiet. We both looked away, and I hurriedly had to stand, trying to keep up a front. As much as I sought to preserve a feeling of normal, a disturbing emotion stayed down on my heart like a weight too great to raise. Things seemed normal on the surface, yet I felt the change. Underneath it all, Dad started to display a recently developed curiosity in my life, inquiring about my day and observing the little information he had missed before. To his started astounds me with fresh clothing, then presents I hadn't asked for first. These actions confused me, but I learned over time that this one felt different from the affection I had always been aware that today was one that signaled a dramatic change in my father's, and my connection is a moment captured in my memory always. Mother had left for a work trip, a result of the suggestion made by the school, leaving simply my father and me in the house. I came home from the university, and what I expected was very different. On the dining table, my father had set a fancy supper with great ambience in. The house changed to assume a rather romantic trade as the candle light danced in the center of the meal. It permeated the surroundings and smelled like fantastic, and 2 red wine bottles sat politely on the table. Surprised was clear when I looked at my father's laughing. Why? I could not escape. Are you so considerate today? I said, still considering it as only a joyful coincidence, a welcome surprise free of a sliver of anything more meaningful. With his usual smile, which my father brought up, he had something to impart, some good news. Successful, he wanted to commemorate. I felt a happy explosion that I choose not to probe even more, just to enjoy this evening dinner with my family. Father, we assembled around the table, distributing, eat and drink, the wine running naturally in our glasses, the gentle candlelight radiate warmth to produce a mood more close than ever at that instant. Everything seemed appropriate and normal too. Acquainted, however, from this proximity, a greater meaning started to show up as a feeling. I battled to explain. We ate and traded secrets, remembering my early years when I was the small youngster learning from constantly hung to my father, tender recollections. As tiny jokes floated around, everyone loved. We both laughed at the tension from past vanishing, akin to mist in the sun, laughed within the heated chamber, producing an environment that seemed more personal than it has ever been. Following 2 wine bottles, I could feel the affects on taking hold of my thoughts. Was relaxation. Wine clouded my senses. We sat nearer together, and I wasn't sure if it was the wine or something more profound, but then a question dropped out of me, one I never would have thought I would ask. Do you like me? I asked in a gentle but firm voice. No more innocent father asking questions. was not the young child's naive inquiry, but had a deeper connotations as though I were requesting from my rather different background, the one in which my sobriety mind would never let me mention. My father said nothing for a moment, then he turned to gaze deeply at me, his eyes considerate as though he were scrutinizing. Then he responded from inside me. Voice war sure, just one word, but it was weighty and full with latent significance. We both glanced at one another at that same moment. The space appeared to stop right between us. It was now the link between father and daughter, still surpassing any link I had prior knowledge of. In that second, I didn't know what drove me, maybe the alcohol or the surge of feelings long ago that had been hidden silently. I grabbed out and clasped the odd neck of my father. Feeling flowed through me, but I continued on, not overanalyzing. All I knew was that I couldn't to contain myself. My father hesitated shortly, but soon he returned my hug, his arms around my waist, tightening the area that once divided us as our eyes bound in a residual hug of comprehension. Words dropped off, leaving just the silence conversation of our most deep ideas. Our lips initially met cautiously, as if we were digging up a long-lost love. Still, in a few seconds, that ambiguity melted into a strong emotional flash blast. Our hug becomes more tightened, not only because approach closer to catch this ephemeral, right away to etch it into memory. My heart raced, mirroring the force of the moment when I laid against my father's chest. The coziness of his body surrounded me, driving the fade in the surroundings. Far away, he started to gently trace his fingers on my back, investigating every shape, every breath. From what began to be soft tenderness changed gradually into a lengthy hug, as though he were unable of stifling the developing need inside him. His fingers slid across my skin, apprehensive yet excited, as if he aimed to find every little secret detail without passing over 1 second. Every touch, every movement, and felt trembles through, as though my body reacted on its own will, with a soft elevation to his every motion. Though my father cradled me in his arms forcefully, his big arms gripped me, as though he wanted not to let go. I wrapped, feeling the weight of my arms around his neck. He walked with the rhythm of our quick breaths, without second thought, guiding me into the space in which gloom surrounded us, save considering the little light coming in from outside. In that instant, we let all go questions, time, space, concentrating just on one other, as though the planet had come to a halt. All thoughts vanished, leaving behind a great need, a strong bond that words could create, never record. My father assigned me to the bed, and our lips found each other once more, melding in passionate but tender kisses, as though separation was impossible, and could feel his cozy breath blending with it. Accelerated my heart's pace. His hands moved purposefully, not buttoning my shirt, with every soft touch over every button erased the feeling of exposure, exceeded simple nudity. It was a significant. We both exposed our vulnerabilities. That felt my chest becoming tighter, yet at the same time all reservations started to. That evening we stopped holding back, and everything breaks through all the obstacles. Resolutions were violated, as though the world had only the two of us left. Every movement carried more significance, as though one wanted to carve out each other's picture into our bodies and consciousness. We handed everything, not only physical, also each other. Intimacy, yet also the blending of emotions, of covert wants that had been repressed for so long. That evening both of us knew that every limit has been deleted, and nothing except every other's whole presence in that time. The next day, when my mother went home, everything seemed to be. My father and I returned to normal, engaged as usual, grinning and speaking as though nothing out of the common had happened the evening before. Her mother stayed blind to the change in the surroundings from breakfast, together talking on everyday subjects like any normal family. Nonetheless, underlined under surface, I knew both of us had felt the weight of what had happened, even with our outward calm. A great stillness hung between my father and me. Every gaze and movement had more meaning, it felt as. Nonetheless, we were linked in a secret affair, a secret haunting the shadows. Even if we know of their wrongness, our interactions with grew more reserved, and hurriedly raising the conflict between want and shame. We realized the ramifications of our activities, still neither of which we were ready for. Cut it off. Every fleeting touch and every last gaze spoke so much implying a going forward free from the demand for oral pledges. Then one terrible night, as my mother slept in a profound sleep, my father slipped into my chamber, quiet as a whisper, while I stayed contentedly oblivious of his. Beside me, his arms were there, wrapped around me. The unusual warmth shocked me awake and surrounded my body. Slightly turned my head and discovered his familiar face close by. The instant of surprise passed, then my lips curled into a soft smile, embracing my father. At that moment, I forget all around us, leaving just him. And gently, "Dad, be careful, Mom won't." Here, my voice shook as I whispered, similar to the frigid breeze invading the split in the door. Every phrase seemed challenging to say, as if I were striving to suppress something strong inside. Something buried deep within me sensed on the about to have my throat choked closed. But my heart flew furiously in my chest. Hands clasped the blanket tightly, trying to stop the waves of shaking. By me, every breath came out in ragged breaths, as if an invisible fear were limiting my air. The room surrounded us in a terrible quiet in which even the little movement or sound sent my heart into a frenzy, afraid this secret, our bold love, would be on display for all to see. All we are losing, disintegrating, battled to stifle the fear of being seen hovering over us, slowly changed into a consuming obsession. Yet I discovered I couldn't refused. Whenever Dad showed up, it became clear me that I was caught in this connection, completely aware of its unavoidable. Then the day I had been waiting for disaster at last arrived. My mother phoned to tell me something had come up, keeping her away from returning home as booked. She would just go back the early morning. A brief feeling of relief flooded Dad and me as we, amused by the idea of an continuous evening, we threw off our worries, thinking we still had lots time till the next morning. Unannounced, my mother came back, catching we were off guard in our carelessness and missed. She stood before her arrival to observe the still scene and realized that everything had turned. The planet feel as though it were falling around her. And at that moment, all was lost. I felt a weight in my chest, unable of expressing while my father stayed still at a loss of language. The house's air was heavily weighted and tense, giving little room for comprehension or empathy. Following the observation of my mother's, as she relaxed with the terrible reality, turned away without saying, leaving the house rich in a terrible silence. The space between my father from me thickened with a painful tension, loaded with unwritten phrases and a great feeling of guilt. We discovered we were at loss, unclear of how to negotiate the aftermath of exposed truths. Days dragged on a repressive silence. My mother, lacking from our daily existence, finally deciding to file for divorce. The marriage I had thought to be indissoluble scattered, leaving the house empty of coziness and loaded with an uncomfortable nothingness I found consuming me. Facing the leftovers of a once happy family, I discovered I was mired in chaos. Dubious of the road ahead, split between my mother and father, made me immobile by uncertainty. The man having been my tower of strength had changed into the stimulant of my hopelessness, when my mother, who have raised me with now relentless love, felt far off. Crippled by an unworkable grief, it woke me to realize my misplaced feelings and weaknesses had set off permanent effects. The structure of my family collapsed from the effects of decisions I never considered might result in severe damage. Affected not only my father and mother as well as me, causes us to lose affection and faith in one. When I saw that everything, limits and family dynamics have to be respected after they are transgressed, there is no return to love independent of deep. Can mankind make such serious mistakes? I now find myself at a junction in my life, unsure of direction or whom to visit or turn to find myself, not sure whether I could face my father or mother. I wonder if still I have a place in there. Lives the family I knew today, only a ghostly memory of my future, still covered in mystery. I am sharply conscious that I have to face the results of my activities and grow to cohabit with this ongoing suffering. Many will pass judgment, thus expect, after learning my story, defining my actions as unforgivable, but I'm ready for that. I understand that viewpoints change, hence I'm ready to welcome the examination. Basically, what counts most is that I, having got the bravery to face my reality and honor the suffering and outcome of my mistakes, my last work of Guidance for those currently pursuing this narrative is to keep alert and maintain limits in any connection, especially in the family at times. Closeness and love can mask our wisdom, leading to bad decisions we never thought we would maintain in. Remember that every deed bears some errors and consequences. Call for irreparable, leaving behind suffering for years, and harm do not let pass through. Emotions impair your judgment and fight the wanna follow routes. It could cause lifetime regret. Honor the need of limits, protection, love, and confidence among family members. For once broken, there is no comeback. At times we are allowed but a single chance to value what really concerns, and loss of it might cause the extreme grief. Like what you heard, there's plenty more heartbreak and secrets to come. Hit like, subscribe, and stay curious with Tangled Truths. Like what you heard, there's plenty more heartbreak and secrets to come. Hit like, subscribe, and stay curious with Tangled Truths.